Welcome to Revenue Radio. I am Stacy Taubman and your host, and I am so excited for our guest today. I met David about a month ago, and when he started sharing about his path and the companies he worked for, I was blown away and knew I had to have him on Revenue Radio because as second stage business owners, it is so helpful to learn from people who have done it and done it big. So thank you for being here, David.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me and welcoming to your really cool studio here. This is awesome.
Right, I'm impressed. Our CMO, Sabrina, built it out and did a fabulous job. So it's an honor to be the host here at Revenue Radio. Well, you know, I know you've had quite the career. I'd love to hear a little bit about that and your experience.
Sure. No, I'm 22 years into a finance career. I've worked for a variety of companies, interesting ones, public companies, private companies, large family-owned businesses, private equity-backed. So I've done a little bit of everything. For the last 10 years, I've been in 3 CFO roles, a consumer packaged goods business. So manufacturing.
Okay.
And then I was the leader of a CFO leader of a veterinary platform, very large vet business. And then most recently, human healthcare in the behavioral healthcare side. So variety of experiences. You know, I say my domain expertise, if you will, is multi-unit consumer/healthcare businesses that tend to be have an affinity for growth. So I've had a lot of experience with scaling both revenue and profitability in large organizations.
Yeah, and I'm glad we're going to talk about that today. And, you know, I think it's interesting because CROs and CFOs sometimes, you know, get a bad rap, right? And
We're the bad guy, though.
You are. I was trying to say that nicely. But I think, you know, as a fractional CRO, when we go into companies, it is so important that we pair up and work well with the CFOs because the company is going to scale and grow so much better. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on today. You know, we put on an event called Growth Amid Uncertainty earlier this week, and you raised your hand and asked a wonderful question about profitability. Because I think so often second stage CEOs try to grow their company and they get advice to basically grow at all costs, or they'll start one-off trying to do things like, oh, I'll dump a bunch of money into marketing, you know, without looking at the global picture. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about profitability and maybe even your question that you asked, and let's go down that path.
So, you know, our economy goes through cycles and we're in the midst of a cycle change now, but the reality is we've been living in a boom period.
We really have.
For a lot of entrepreneurs and businesses, the focus has been three priorities: grow, and grow. And I think, you know, the economic environment's changed. It's shifted. We've been living in essentially a zero interest rate environment for a while.
Yep.
And those days are over. Maybe they'll come back. I don't know, but they're over. And so things are changing. And so I think companies and CEOs need to have revisit the priorities.
Yeah.
It's still about growth, and that won't change. But I think you need to be equally focused on cash burn.
Yes.
Particularly for a stage 2 company, as well as profitability and margin. Right. So it's grow, cash burn, and margin versus grow. And
well, and when we as CROs and CMOs are going into companies and building out the go-to-market, what kind of things can we be thinking about to really ensure that we're setting our CEOs up for success?
Yeah, no. So I believe if you're not growing, you're dying.
That's
right?
true. That's very true.
Again, I want to reiterate. I know this is Revenue Radio, right? So growth
We're not saying no revenue.
So growth is important, but I think it's the quality of the revenue that needs to be laser focused on right now. I think there's really important things that CFOs should be partnering with their CEO and the entire leadership team, frankly, on that maybe were not priorities or focus areas in the past. So,
interesting.
You know, I think for maybe your audience, understanding the lifetime value of your customer.
Yes.
What is that customer generating, and what is the duration? What is the lifetime value of that revenue stream? Because they're not all equal.
They're not. And I think in the second stage, sometimes what we've seen when we go into companies is they're not collecting the data or having, you know, a tech stack that enables them to be able to capture that. And without that information, it's hard to make really smart decisions. So I'm glad that you're talking about lifetime value.
So LTV is super important, but in conjunction with looking at LTV, I think you need to understand your CAC, right?
Yes.
The customer acquisition cost. And I think this is where in these uncertain times, we really need to peel back the onion, so to speak. And because we in finance, we call this fun with numbers, right? Like you can.
That sounds like an oxymoron. I feel like there's some people cringing right now.
The idea here is how you define some of these things matter because they will give you different answers. So if you think of your CAC or your cost of acquisition or cost of acquiring that customer or that incremental revenue, is it simply the marketing campaign you drove? Is it the investment in SEO or is it more of the marketing part?
Yeah.
Or have you or is it the incremental salesperson? Because sometimes we define it and we stop there. But really, I think we need to understand what else are we spending money in the organization on to support that account?
Yeah.
Right.
And I think in this phase, what we heard, and I think you heard Mary at the event say, opinions are valuable, but data is priceless. And I think a lot of CEOs in that second stage experience aren't able to answer those questions yet. And making that a priority, I think, is really important.
Right. Because I think where I'm going with this is if you know your LTV and you know your CAC, then what is your CAC payback? You need to understand, like, what is the break-even point? How long does this revenue need to be generated consistently to pay back the investment to get that incremental customer, that incremental project?
Right.
Because that will give you a better idea of the profitability of that revenue. Because again, not all revenue is created equal.
It isn't. And I feel like in your early days, revenue is such a vanity metric that there's so much like, I want to be a $5 million company. I want to be a $10 million company. But if you're losing money, that's not a win.
Yeah. So that's actually a good segue. I think cash burn is super important to be focused on. Right?
Okay, say more.
So how much cash are you burning for the revenue, incremental revenue you're generating, right?
Yeah.
So look at your cash burn ratios, right?
Yeah.
If you're burning $100 of cash, so to speak, to use simple numbers, if you're burning $100 of cash to generate $100 of revenue, that ratio is 1.
Right.
If you're burning $100 of cash to generate $200 of revenue, that's a ratio of 0.5. Obviously, the smaller the number, the better. The bigger the number, the more scary and troubling your business can become, right? So again, quality of revenue, quality of earnings, being super focused on not just the P&L, but the balance sheet.
Right.
And then things like working capital, right? We talked about this the other day, this is the time to be looking at your receivable balances. Are they aging as you would expect? Are they aging in line with your contractual terms?
Right.
Because revenue is worthless if it doesn't convert into cash.
It's true.
It's cash in the bank that matters. Like cash is king is one of my fundamental beliefs, right? So
when I think all this is a big shift, right? In the boom days, as you mentioned, it was, just grow, burn money as much as you can, but make sure you're growing. We look at people like WeWork. Yep. They grew at all costs, and we saw how that played out.
Right.
And what's so great about being a fractional CRO or a fractional CFO or a full-on CFO is supporting the CEOs on this process, because I think CEOs who are listening might be even glazing over at this point, right? Because not all CEOs that this is sort of their strength. And so I think having that support and having people to come in to be able to, get through all the things we're talking about and really be intentional instead of reactive. I think that's something that's so important and what we do a lot at House Revenue with companies.
Yeah, I'm sure all those CEOs out there are laser focused on their business and they probably live and breathe it 24 hours a day.
Yes.
But are you truly understanding the real economic performance? Mm-hmm. And are you pressure testing your assumptions?
Ooh, say more about
pressure
that.
Testing. Is this the right revenue stream? Have you segmented your revenue? Have you understood and prioritized the kind of customers that are the ones you want long term?
Right.
Are you looking at some of these metrics like I'm talking about, like LTV and CAC payback? Are you looking at working capital? Are you creating reserves in a war chest for strategic investments, or maybe just to weather this economic storm?
Right.
That I don't know. I don't have the crystal ball, but it could be 12 to 24 months, maybe longer, right? So are you laser focused on generating cash? And I used receivables as an example. Another one would be your payables, right? I've actually been in businesses, large successful businesses, and you go and look at the data and you're surprised you're actually paying your vendors sometimes faster than necessary. Right? So look at that, right? Like maybe it's just the payment mechanism or the schedule of the way your AP department works. Maybe you're paying sooner than necessary. You certainly don't want to pay later than you should, because that's not good business.
Right.
But is this the time to be looking at your suppliers or vendors and renegotiating payment terms?
Well, and I think that fits, I've talked before and I've been on the show about the entrepreneur catch-22. The things that made us successful to get to that second stage are not the things that help us beyond. And moving fast and just quick and being reactive has helped people to get to where they are. But what I'm hearing you say is that second stage to get, further, you have to sort of slow down to speed up.
Yeah.
And that's why, for us, we go in and take a month to audit, research, and create a whole 12-month go-to-market plan. And it, because we want people to be able to do what you're saying, because it's, that just reactive stuff doesn't work anymore.
Right. And so I think the partnership with your accounting and finance team is super important. Get to know those folks.
Yeah. Instead of having that, relationship, right?
The best finance teams are those that add value and are welcome to have a seat at the table, because, I believe good CFOs are, as much as we're co-pilots and we look for where things can go right, and we encourage the CEO to pursue those things, we're also custodians. We look for where things can go wrong.
Okay.
And our job is to help mitigate the risk.
Right.
And so, it is our job to be the yin to the yang, or however that works, with the CEO, and just make sure that we're being very diligent and thoughtful, and looking at the data, and peeling back the onion, dig deeper. Don't, when we think about return on investment, people generally understand that concept, but it actually gets more complicated when you ask the question of define return and define investment. Is return incremental revenue? Is it incremental gross profit? Or is it incremental gross EBITDA margin?
Right.
Those are three very different things. They will give you three very different answers. And likewise on the investment side, and just to reiterate what I mentioned earlier, is the incremental investment the ad campaign? Is it the salesperson you added? Well, maybe, but how about the operation support that you had to add to manage that customer?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of burden costs out there that you want to make sure you're making decisions eyes wide open and fully understanding the true cost of your business.
Well, and I think, if I was a second stage CEO and listening to you, I could see myself saying, yeah, I totally get it. He's right. I can't afford a CFO like him. And I think because of that is why the fractional models have become so popular.
Sure.
Because I think people are starting to recognize and understand I need people like you, but taking on a full-time CFO is a little bit above me, so to speak. Same with bringing on a fractional CRO, CMO. I think that model has really boomed because of that. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, no, I think everyone needs help. Everyone's looking for good finance professionals today, and because they can pay for themselves rather quickly. But maybe you can't. To your point, let's say you can't afford those resources. Because that's why I want to make
sure that we're covering our bases.
Yeah, so my provocation to those who maybe are at a stage where they don't have this kind of support is just ask better questions.
Oh, give us an example.
So I'm a big fan or believer that the quality of the business you run will have a lot to do with the quality of questions you ask. So just, go to that 5 why. Don't stop too early in understanding, don't say, why did this happen? Say, why did the why happen, right?
Oh, so ask the question why 5 times. Because when you said 5 why, I'm like, is that 5 years? What is he saying?
No, 5.
So ask why 5 times when you're facing something.
Yeah, just so that even maybe if the only outcome is better self-awareness around what you don't know.
And again, that's about slowing down and being intentional is what I'm hearing. By having to ask yourself why 5 times.
Right.
Yeah, wow. Well, I feel like we could talk all day about finance and making smart decisions. Is there any point that we haven't covered that you want to hit on before we call it a day?
I would just say, again, if you're not growing, you are dying. So I get it. Revenue and growing your revenue is how businesses maintain sustainability. But cash is king. And if in any market, it's this market that focus needs to be there. So really work on the quality of your revenue to ensure that you can weather a storm that may be here for a couple of years.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, David. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. I know our CEOs learned so much from you, and I look forward to maybe having you back.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.